Welcome to Decoding the Conflict Mindset. Today, I'm so excited to bring to you Dr. Sharon Lamm-Hartmann. Sharon is the CEO of Inside Out Learning, an award-winning leadership team and organizational development consulting company, working with Fortune 50 and 100 companies, as well as those small to mid-sized businesses. Team helps transform companies, their teams, and leaders to achieve exceptional results. Her book, The Authenticity Code, is now a bestseller in the Wall Street Journal, US Today, and Amazon, and recently won the Axiom Business Book Awards Gold Medal for Best Business Fable. She was also named one of the 2022 100 Women to Know across America by the Know Women Group. So I'm so excited to have Dr. Sharon on board with this. Incredible insight, incredible experience, and incredible wisdom. Listen and see what you can learn from Dr. Sharon. I'm Dr. Debra Dupree, your host and founder of Decoding the Conflict Mindset. We'll be starting soon. Don't go away. There's still time to let your friends and colleagues know about this exciting premiere coming up. And if you haven't already subscribed, do so now. You will not want to miss out on learning about exceptional speakers like Dr. Sharon and many more to come. Welcome to Decoding the Conflict Mindset. Hi, I'm your host and founder of Decoding the Conflict Mindset, Dr. Debra Dupree. One of the things we try to do is bring thought leaders together from across disciplines and throughout the world to talk about how they view the human dynamic, how they see a shift in how we show up. And today I'm so delightful to have with us Dr. Sharon. Welcome, Dr. Sharon.
Oh, it's so great to be here, Deborah. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I'd like to let people know that, we connected through another mastermind group that we're part of, and I was attracted to your message, and particularly about Inside Out and the Authenticity Code. And so I'd like to ask you, Dr. Sharon, what led you to that mindset about looking at things from these two perspectives?
Deborah, it's such a good question because Inside Out Learning, I actually came up with in the year 2000. And when I was really starting to take a look, as I was doing a lot of executive coaching and working and training leaders inside of Fortune 500 companies, I would notice that if I could help them shift on the inside, their outside would change. And then I started to also play with this as well. And we were doing a lot of work with ExxonMobil at the time. And I started to play with that and start to do a lot of work around what's your big assumptions that might be running your life. And if you get in touch with those big assumptions and just become aware of them, you end up having more choice over them. So they're not running your life, but you actually are able to have choice and say, oh, that's my big assumption. I don't have to do that same pattern. And it's amazing. I started to notice that in my own life, if I shifted a mindset that I might have, how my external world would change. Maybe if I become more confident and believe in myself instead of thinking I'm not good enough, well, then I end up attracting more clients. So it's amazing how that inside out can really play into our lives. And so often we're always looking at, oh, I need to change my external world. I need to get that house or write that book or whatever that is, and then I'll be happy. But sometimes we really have to go inside and let that outside manifest.
Yes, there's two things that come to my mind, Dr. Sharon, as you say that. One is, oftentimes people are quick to blame or say, you change and then I'll change, or right. You respect me, I'll respect you. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. It has to start, from me, it starts from you, and then we influence the world around us.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm reminded of Dr. Wayne Dyer's quote, change the way you look at things and the things you look at change.
It's so true, right? Exactly. Like if I'm looking at my teenage son and just thinking get off video games, right? But if I, if instead I look at it and say, you know what, he's learning a lot from this. He's learning strategy and he's learning how to work as a team, and just shifting little mindsets like that even can make a big difference. And then he becomes more warm towards me.
Yeah, because you're paying attention, you're acknowledging him and so forth. And I'll just share one other quick tidbit before I go to my next question for you. October is always a busy month in my profession as a mediator, and so been at lots of conferences and speaking. And in one particular one, I was looking for a video that would help really emphasize something rather than me just saying it. And I came across a video by Chris Wakefield, and he talks about Stephen Covey, and I draw a lot on Dr. Covey's work as well. And he relates a story, and I'm not going to go into the story now. People can reach out to me if they want to know more about it. But he said, 5 little words, and those 5 little words, and I'm thinking about when you were talking about your teenager and playing video games. What else could this mean?
Yes.
What else could this mean? And so it's looking beyond the surface and to say, where might be the other person be coming from?
Yes. And even I love that, because many times I'll be thinking about what's the driver of that behavior.
Right.
Don't just look at the behavior, but what's the driver of that behavior? And that's how kids connect these days. That really is how a lot of friendships form and what they do. And so you've got to kind of look at the driver behind why people are doing things.
Absolutely. You talk about cracking the code.
Yes.
And so in becoming more authentic. And so say more about that, cracking the code.
Yes. So I came up with the term the authenticity code because we were doing these training programs inside of Fortune 500 companies. They used to be called executive presence and presentation skills programs. And as I interviewed a lot of participants and said, what did you really get out of the program? So many of them said, I became more of who I truly am as a leader. I became more authentic as a leader. I stopped trying to be someone I wasn't. And when I really stepped into that authenticity inside out, the world around me changed and I got that dream job, or I got that promotion. So when I looked at the program, and what were we teaching in that program? It was 3 key things. One is your presence. So you bring you wherever you go. The second is your audience. So your audience, how do you tailor that message to the audience that you're choosing to serve? And that's an authentic choice to be in front of an audience. So how do you best serve and tailor to them? And then the final is your presentation. What's your message? And how do you best communicate that message? So the code is your presence plus your audience plus your presentation equals your success. And if you take one of those ingredients out, you won't be as successful.
That's really, I think really you just summed it up so concisely with those 3 things, 3 key things: presence,
audience,
and message, right? Yes. Okay, great. Because that ties into another concept I've worked with some of my clients, is developing your own personal brand. Who are you and how do you want to portray yourself and how do you want to show up? And this certainly goes not only for leaders, but anybody, in their profession.
Yeah, that is such an important concept. I'm so glad that you brought that up. That's actually in my book. I call it the authentic brand, and it's part of the your presence part of the code. So when we are connected to that brand and who we are and who we want to be and what we want to accomplish, that is when we are being the most authentic version of ourselves. So that is part of your presence. There's more in your presence as well. There's lots of tools in the book and in our programs, but that's a big part of it, Debra, that I think we all need to know. Who are we as a professional and as a leader? And what legacy do we want to leave?
That is so true, because, I know I can't remember who coined this term, but, you may think you're a leader, but if you have no followers, you're not really a leader, and so leadership requires followership. And so people will follow you if they believe in what your message is, and they can align and identify with who you are, how you show up.
Yes, exactly. And so often there's 10 questions in the book that help you to identify your authentic brand.
Okay.
And a key part of it is getting in touch with your greatest gift to give. And we each have unique gifts, and we need to pay attention to, what do people tell you over and over again is a strength you have that just comes naturally to you. So one of those for me is, well, I'm able to create safe spaces for people to tell the truth, which in the conflict mindset that you talk about is so critical, right? To be able to facilitate conflict, you have to hold a space where people feel safe to tell the truth. So that might be one of the greatest gifts. One of the questions is, what is a strength that comes really natural to you that maybe you've been told over and over again in your life?
Okay, perfect. Because I was just going to ask you, what's an example of one of your questions? That you talked about the 10 questions. So perfect, right on. You mentioned that safe space, and so I didn't coin this, I wish I did, but Amy Edmondson from Harvard coined it back in around 2011, 12 or something like that. But she talked about psychological safety, and
Yes.
so I will oftentimes, we've come a long way, baby, when it comes to physical safety, but if you look at the number of complaints before EEOC in terms of discrimination, retaliation, harassment, we haven't even dented the surface, And so I'm a water person, so I like to use the notion of creating a safe harbor, because what does a harbor do for boats? It helps give them a safe place to go from the high winds and the rough seas, and that's what conflict really is.
I love that. I love that. That's really
Well, you gave us an example of one of your 10 questions. What would be an example of an authentic brand statement? And say a little bit more about why that's so important to develop.
It really is. So the authentic brand statement, and I can read mine because it's right on my book cover. So I'll give you my example, but it's 5 of the 10 questions. So I'm a global thought leader who helps as many students, professionals, and leaders be who they came here to be and do what they came here to do. I help my audience crack the authenticity code and transform into their authentic selves. I give this by helping people see and express their unique gifts and talents, and by providing a safe environment so they can see and speak their truth. So that's an example of really understanding who you are, what type of role you want to play in the world. So for me, it's a global thought leader. And then you want to think about, what do you most want to do in that role, and what do you most want to change in that role in the world? And then what's your greatest gift, because you're going to do that by your greatest gift. So that's an example of an authentic brand statement. And I always encourage people to read that in the morning, in the evening, or whenever you need an inspiration. Like during COVID, when a lot of our business went away overnight, I would read that many times a day to keep really centered on, why am I doing what I'm doing?
Right. Well, it's interesting. Because I oftentimes, I like to have a saying that goes, repetition reinforces retention. And so the more you say it, like every morning, every night, the more you believe it.
Yes. And that's what I find too, Debra. I think that's right on. The more people keep this in front of them, I can't tell you how many times in our programs, after they've developed this statement, I get an email or a LinkedIn message or a phone call that says, wow, Sharon, I actually achieved this brand. Now I need a new one. And so I'm like, well, re-answer the 10 questions.
Yeah.
But it's great that to hear how so many people, and they may even put, sometimes they might be a manager or a senior manager, and they end up putting senior vice president on their brand statement because that's where they want to go. And they move there more quickly as well, over maybe a period of 4 or 5 years, because they are connected with their essence.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of things in there that I'd like to just comment on. You mentioned COVID, and it sounds like you, like me, like many, we lost a lot of business during that time. And I know when it first hit, and I just, had many thousands of dollars of training programs just go up in the air, and I sat down and go, okay, obviously my world isn't going the way I thought it was going to go. And all these training plans I had for 2020 are gone. And so what do I really want to do? And quite honestly, that's where decoding the conflict mindset really grew out of that, because I said, I'm passionate about helping people navigate through conflict. And because I can see the way, I can, gut strategies, tips, and that's where I've really been focusing on. So so thank you for sharing your story as far as, retooling what we do, but also having that vision.
Well, and your story really resonates with me as well, because that's when I wrote the book. So
Oh,
when all the business went away, right? I took
yeah.
a look myself and had my brand statement, and I'm like, well, this is a perfect time. I've been procrastinating writing. It's time to really publish this book.
Well, that's great. Well, congratulations, because I meant to do that during COVID and didn't get the book written. But now things have happened, so now I'm much more motivated again. But yeah, it's funny how things go. Going back to what you said, as far as, having that vision of where you want to go, and then how much more quickly you achieve that vision. It's not unlike you know, really good sports players who visualize them time and time again, making that successful shot, hitting that, ace in the tennis court, or whatever that is. And so that visualization and having it, you're sort of retooling, you're retraining your brain, actually.
You are. And the more you say it, like you said, that repetition, the more you believe it. And when you have that belief with your action. So I really believe you need the belief that, yes, it's going to happen. It will happen. I see this happening. Plus you're putting action and effort into having it happen.
Yeah.
Taking the steps to get there, like showing up at practice if you're on a sports team, right? And practice
right.
all of that. Yeah, that's when I believe in all of that so much. And many times I'll even say to our clients or participants in our training programs, really visualize what before you have a big meeting or a big presentation, how you want it to go.
Yeah. Because then our brains will take us there.
That's right.
Yeah. I'm curious, we've talked about, the importance of the authenticity, branding and breaking the code and the 10 questions. And you gave your own example of your branding statement. What would you say to somebody who wants to tailor the communication, in their whatever their audience might be, on the stage and in the corporation, with the team, what would you suggest they start doing?
Yes. So authenticity, part of authenticity is knowing who your audience, your target audience is, who you want to be in front of. And it's an authentic choice to choose to be in front of them. So I do believe that we need to best serve them. This is where authenticity comes together with servant leadership. And so to really keep in mind who they are, you can ask yourself some questions, simple questions like, okay, what's important to them? What level of detail do they need? What might hook them to listen to you? What are they willing to compromise? These are just some questions you can think through that might take 5 minutes to answer, or you ask their inner circle if you don't know. And then you need to also assess their personality. So we actually have in the book, there's a style recognition, and we have a free assessment that anyone can take, but there's 4 P's, and I call it the 4 P's. So there's party people, point people, and planner people. And so you can assess, okay, who am I dealing with here? Because I tend to be more of a point person. I like to get to the point, get results, get done, move on. And if I'm talking to a people person and they want to connect with me first, I could lose a business deal or not really reach my audience if I don't take the time to warm up and have a conversation with them first before getting down to business.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you said that, because that's something I always like to go back to the science of human dynamics and how our brains work. But the power of connection, even for the point person, is oftentimes underrated by them, but it's so critically important. And so it's really essential that we know who we're going to deal with, and that's one of the key foundations of a good negotiation, is more about your party so that you can talk a language that they can listen to. And oftentimes people in conflict, for example, are not talking very nicely to each other, and therefore people stop listening.
Yes. And there's actual tips in the book that help you to look for clues. There's certain clues that these different types give off, so you can be assessing. And then there's some tips on how do you adapt your language based on who you're in front of. And even if you're thinking about doing a presentation and your main decision maker is a planner person, you better have facts and data and plans that you're going to present to them.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've really embodied, sort of the basic learning styles. Some of us are more auditory, some of us are more visual, some of us are more kinesthetic, and so it sounds like your approach really takes into consideration all of those points as far as how to connect with people and how to engage with them in a way, again, that they can listen to you and learn from you, while also doing what they need to do.
Exactly. And that you can achieve your goal of your message. You can achieve the goal that being in front of them and really helping to motivate or inspire, whatever that goal might be, more easily.
Wonderful. I when you talk about your book, hold your book up again, please. I want to see it.
Authenticity code.
Okay, so the authenticity code, and elaborate on your subtitle there, the art and science of success, and why you can't fake it to make it.
Right. So what I have really found is that the science of success, right? There's a lot of formulas in the book, code, right? Questions in the book. That's kind of the science. And you follow those formulas and you're more likely to make an exceptional presentation, for example. There's a formula in the book called the Formula for Presentation Success. The art, though, of success is more about having that connection to you and being authentic so that you become the presentation. So that you might even be able to do your presentation with no slides and no PowerPoint, right? And that is the art of success, is when you are so connected to you that you become the presentation. And that's the difference. And why I say why you can't fake it to make it is you might be able to fake feeling confident one day when maybe you're not. But if you're pretending to be someone you're not, people see through that.
Yeah, well, that ties into what we hear so often these days. I heard it several times over the weekend at the conference where I was presenting, the imposter syndrome, and that's really about, faking it till you make it and not feeling good about faking it.
Right. It's, well, the imposter syndrome. Yeah. I mean, it is so real these days. And I'm glad that someone has labeled it to, really feeling like you're not good enough to belong to a certain group or shouldn't be there. It can really get our inner critic going in our minds. And I will tell you, when you're connected to that authentic brand and your greatest gift to give, I see that as an antidote to the imposter syndrome, because you're like, okay, the reason I'm in front of this audience is, for me, I help people see and celebrate their gifts and speak their truth in a safe place. So if I'm doing those things and I'm focused on that for my audience, then it's going to really help me get out of my head from being in the imposter syndrome.
That's a great connection. I'm glad that whole notion came up, because it really is on the forefront, as you said, with a lot of people's minds, and not feeling confident enough. And so it goes back to one of your questions: what are your strengths? What are you good at? What do people see in you that maybe you don't see? And building confidence around that, so that you have the strength and courage and curiosity to go out and be the best you can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm curious then, Dr. Sharon, as far as, I know you've had a couple of distinguished recognitions like the WBENC, and so say a little bit more of that, because that's pretty substantial as far as having achieved that recognition.
Yes. So, well, WeBank is a wonderful organization that women-owned businesses should check out. It is really about being a certified women-owned business. And that really helps get you in front of Fortune 500 companies with their supplier diversity focals. And I highly recommend it. It's really helped our business. We've been asked to bid on RFPs for major companies that we would have never had the opportunity to if we didn't have that distinction. So it does take a little bit of time and paperwork to go through.
What doesn't?
Yeah, right. But they're a wonderful organization. And in fact, I present at one of their key leadership programs called We Thrive for the past several years on leadership.
Yeah, yeah. Well, wonderful. Yeah, I'm familiar with that organization, and I know how they can be instrumental in terms of opening up some pipelines that might not normally exist just because of your fellowship, your affiliation with the organization. So that's great. That's great. Now, I also see that you're you write regularly for the Phoenix Woman magazine.
Yes. So the Phoenix Women's Magazine, I wrote a column there for many years, and that was a real privilege and honor to do so. I really love thinking about, and I would always be asking out in the community, what do you want to know about? And what would be most helpful to you as a leader in the community? And so being able to choose those kinds of columns and write that was wonderful.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. I really love how you are giving back, particularly to the female entrepreneur, the female leader, and yet I know your services are applicable and relevant to all leaders at every walk of life.
Absolutely. They are. They absolutely are. That's a passion I have, is helping women start businesses and really scale their business as well. But we work with all genders. So
yeah.
well,
that's great. Yeah. And so in sort of closing, Dr. Sharon, I'd like to ask you, encourage people to get your book, obviously, because I think it's just wonderful in terms of the messaging and all the practical tips and guidance that you provide. That if there was like one or two key, takeaways that you would want people to glean from this interview and the work that you do, what would that be?
Well, first is really connect with your essence, that authenticity, your most powerful way of adding value by expressing your unique gifts and talents. And when you connect with that, then stand in it. Really express it, be it proudly, give it proudly. And I think that is at the core of breaking the code. So I would say if you're going to focus anywhere, focus in there, and then really think about that audience and your message and how to be clear and concise and influential, given who your audience is, without losing your own authenticity.
Yeah, that's great. Powerful words, powerful words. So if people wanted to reach out and connect with you, how best should they do that?
Well, if you go to my website, insideoutlearning.com, you can connect with me there. Also see all the things, because it's not just me and my company. We have 40 consultants who work through my company and several employees. So check out what we do. We would love that. And I'm also very active, as you know, on LinkedIn. So you can look up my profile. That's how we met, on LinkedIn. So
yes, we did. Yes, we did.
So you can look up Dr. Sharon Lamm-Hartmann on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect with you.
Great. And just to make sure, because it's LAMM-Hartmann.
Yes, thank you so much for clarifying that.
Yeah. Well, very good. Well, Dr. Sharon, it's been delightful to have you on the show, Decoding the Conflict Mindset, because you certainly have helped do that with breaking the authenticity code, and just wonderful tips. And I can see a lot of similarities in terms of how we think, and we work with different populations, and that's okay, And so partnership and fellowship with you is delightful. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. Yes, I've really enjoyed seeing our connections as well, and happy to help any way I can.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for being here today and listening to this dynamic interview with Dr. Sharon. And, please pass it on, share it. Don't hold it to yourself. If you know of others who might be struggling in their leadership roles, or just challenged with, where do I go now? Because as we know, like with COVID, and even now again, life changes. And so we need to be ready to evolve with it, but we can get ahead of it by having some vision about where we want to go. So if you haven't already, subscribe, again, pass it on, share this video with others, and please come back. We'll be back in 2 more weeks with another exciting guest speaker. Dr. Debra Dupree, the Mindset Doc, host and founder of Decoding the Conflict Mindset. I hope you gained a lot from Dr. Sharon's insights on being an authentic leader. If you're ready to take action on what next steps you can do, then get to Amazon and grab her book, as it outlines concrete action items. And it might be time for those entrepreneurial lawyers to listen in on our next episode with Chris Johnson. Chris holds a dual JD MBA and is filled with entrepreneurial spirit. With his combined education experience in big law, Chris grew to learn that there had to be a better way, and he found it. So join me at our next premiere as Chris outlines his unrivaled dual approach to solving the toughest problems facing today's businesses. His legal expertise, combined with his years of experience as a business owner in advertising, retail, and real estate, has uniquely prepared him to bring business-centric judgment and perspective to his clients. You get a lawyer who speaks strategy in plain language. So if you haven't already, subscribe so you can be notified of our next premiere with Chris Johnson. And pass it on to your friends and colleagues. They won't want to miss out. Dr. Debra Dupree, the Mindset Doc.